It's interesting that brand finance started life doing brand valuations for consumer products, and almost by surprise, we discovered that corporate and B2B brands were almost more interested in the practice of branding and how you measure it and how you develop it. And so we've been going nearly 30 years. In fact, it's our 30th anniversary next year. And the predominance of our business moved from fast-moving consumer goods to a whole range of other different types of brands. And somewhere along the way, we were asked by Simon Anholt if we would apply our techniques to nation branding. So that's how we got into that about 20 years ago. And it's a fascinating subject, and it's grown in importance. But I think at the point where we began doing it 20 years ago, there was very little recognition, really, that nations were brands. In fact, I do seem to remember that Simon had this slightly odd view that nations can never be brands. So I always used to wonder, well, so what's your job then? I thought that's what you did. You know, he had this very convoluted thing saying it was about branding, but it's not about brands. Anyway, I got lost with all that. We're just very down to earth. We measure the response to brands in the same way for nations as we do for the other types of brands, and we indicate what difference that would make to decisions. And as we have become more involved with the whole area of place branding, we started by looking at nation brand values, then we got into nation brand research, which is obviously what we're launching tomorrow. We're also looking at regions, and last year we launched a city index. So I'm sure you've seen that. And we have done a specific one for America, where we've done all the city brands in America. We've done 100 global brands, city brands, and I think probably next year we will be doing one in China. They are extremely interested in promoting their cities, and it's quite awesome when you actually talk about the cities in China. My colleague Scott Chen is here from Beijing, and we were chatting about the fact that there are something like 40 cities that are bigger than London in China, but nobody knows much about them. So they are going to get themselves geared up for promotion. So clearly cities have got the branding bug, and they are far ahead, and they are better organized. And I think your presentation demonstrates just how far down the track you are at generating economic growth. So to me, Simon's argument that nations can't be brands or cities can't be brands doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, we're now moving on to the UK Soft Power Council. And last year, we had David Lammy, when he was in opposition, in a panel with Fareed Zakaria and Alistair Campbell. And they were actually talking about misinformation and disinformation, but it was a very lively, interesting debate. And I'd like to think we actually probably influenced him to decide this was a good thing. I'm sure we influenced Alistair Campbell, because suddenly out of the blue, his, The Rest is Politics programme, just about every other episode is about soft power. He's really got the soft power bug. So, I think we'll take credit for the fact that you set the Soft Power Council up. It's obviously a very good idea, in our opinion, because it formalises something which needs to be formalised. Let me just read you a couple of comments that David Lammy has made. Soft power is fundamental to the UK's impact and reputation around the world. We have not taken a sufficiently strategic approach to these huge assets as a country. Harnessing soft power effectively can help to build relationships, deepen trust, enhance our security, and drive economic growth. I have created the Soft Power Council to channel British expertise as we look to reimagine Britain's role on the world stage, reinvigorate alliances, and forge new partnerships. So, quite ambitious. The UK government's new Soft Power Council aims to facilitate a hard-nosed approach, apparently, to apply UK soft power in the service of foreign policy priorities, so foreign policy. The Foreign Secretary and the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sports got together with this, so it's a joint initiative, and they launched it on the 15th of January. So I think they did that because we were having our event today, so they did it to make it easy for us to talk about it. The Council brings together 26 leading figures from soft power domains in the creative industries, sport, media, education, with experts on growth, security, development and migration. So I think we can see the government seems to be taking it very, very seriously. Core to the Council's mission is the pursuit of economic growth, ensuring that a renewed approach to soft power brings tangible economic benefits to the people of the UK. And the Council will identify opportunities to build partnerships at home and abroad and shape a new government strategy to deploy soft power behind all of the UK's international priorities. And the overall aim of these combined efforts is to strengthen the UK reach and reputation. So, that's a very big build-up. We are pleased to say that we have got Katrina Lang, who is the Managing Director of the Soft Power Council. She is actually from the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office and has previously been an ambassador, so I'm sure she'll be very diplomatic about all the things we're just talking about. And she is joined by 3 colleagues from the Council: Sara Pantoliano, who's the CEO of the ODI, Tom Keel, who's the CEO of UK Music, which obviously is a very major area for driving soft power, and Linda Hui, who is a fellow in economics at St Edmund Hall at Oxford University, but also at the LSE. So she's obviously going to have some brainy comments to make about economics. So that is the introduction. Katrina is going to moderate this session. She's got some very hard-nosed questions to ask. The only question that I would ask, actually, which I'll sort of plop you with to start with, it's a fantastic initiative, but we all know that we are in difficult economic times, and it is quite clear that the other players in the world who are developing soft power, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, have very large amounts of money and are spending it because they recognize that soft power and the development of nation brands is extremely important to economic growth. So I am interested to know how, in the current environment, we are going to manage through all that. There are masses of assets that can be better geared to doing this, but in the end, you need money. And so that's my key question, and I'm very interested to hear what you guys have got to say. So with that, I will hand to Katrina to run the session. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you, David, for that great introduction. And just for ask the panel members to introduce themselves and tell you a bit more about themselves. I just want to emphasize that point David made is that it's soft power, but with hard goals. That's the approach we're taking, and that is the rationale for the construction of this Soft Power Council, which isn't just people from the soft power domains, but the first time, as far as I'm aware, we're bringing together people who are experts in those 6 foreign policy goals that the Foreign Secretary has sent us. Number 1, which is certainly primus inter pares, which is growth. Secondly, security. Thirdly, the reset with Europe. Fourthly, migration. Fifthly, climate and nature. And sixthly, international development. So those are our 6 goals. So the Council is a blend of expertise from those domains with the soft power world. So panel members, if you could introduce yourself, and maybe when you do so, just tell us a little bit about why you're interested in soft power and what your particular kind of angle on soft power is. So let me start with you, Sara.
Thanks, Katrina. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Sara Pantoliano. I'm the Chief Executive at ODI Global. ODI is a think tank that works on global cooperation, global affairs, tries to use research and evidence to influence change. So, of course, soft power is at the core of what we do. You know, we try and use our data, our analysis, our research to influence change in global cooperation. I've seen that firsthand throughout my career. I have worked, before being at the helm of ODI as a UN official. I've worked in humanitarian crisis. I've worked in peace building. How change is not necessarily because of resources or even military might in the domain I'm in, but it is around diplomacy, that trust building, that collaboration around shared goals and values that actually achieve much more lasting change that sort of try and direct from the top. So soft power is the essence of my work.
Thank you so much, Sara. And over to you, Linda.
Thank you. So I'm Linda Yu. I'm an economist at Oxford University and London Business School. I became interested in soft power because the academic who coined the term, the Harvard political scientist Joseph Nye, we were doing a panel together, and he turned to me and said, "You're in the wrong department." So he thought I should have been in international relations, because apparently quite a lot of what I do was actually around not just economic growth, but how you actually achieve economic growth through using economic diplomacy, or in other words, soft power. So I'm an academic who, I know, you've heard me say this, I speak in words, not numbers. That might be why I should broaden out what I do. And then In addition to being an academic, I also have the privilege of working in the charity sector. I do a lot of volunteering and serving on corporate boards. So I'm the chair of the Royal Commonwealth Society, which has a range of stakeholders. And I sort of think in many ways, the essence of soft power is the power to persuade. And that's an adaptation of another Harvard political scientist, Dick Neustadt's definition of presidential power. He studied presidents since JFK, and he said presidential power is just the power to persuade. You can be in office but not in power, and you can certainly be in power but not in office. So I should also just add, I chaired the LSE Commission on Economic Diplomacy when I was a visiting professor there for 4 years to think about how to position the UK in the 21st century world economy to make the most of its assets and to grow and increase prosperity for its people. And then just finally, I was very lucky to be on the board of directors of London and Partners. In the run-up to the London Olympics and during the London Olympics. So I've seen firsthand how great this country can be in showcasing its talents to the world.
Great, thank you so much, Linda, and over to you, Tom.
Thank you. I'm Tom Keel. I'm Chief Executive of UK Music. We're an umbrella body for the music industry, and I think we're quite a globally unique organisation, and we bring together both creators but also businesses within the music industry. We've been doing that for a number of years, and we look a lot about the economic value of the sector. It's worth 7.6 billion to the UK, generates exports, and employs a number of people. Our focus on soft power, I think we have, as mentioned earlier by David, I think music is a key driver in the UK's reputation overseas, and the fantastic assets which range from orchestras and theatre productions, but also beyond that in terms of actual artists and the kind of business that we operate under. We're one of 3 net exporters of music across the world. We punch per capita way above our heads in terms of the weight. But I think despite that, we can't be complacent about our position in the world in terms of the music industry. And so I was very encouraged and delighted to participate in the Soft Power Council, because I think it provides a great opportunity for us to really hone in how music can actually make benefits and actually take things forward in that sense. In particular, we've seen other countries, particularly around maybe the Gulf states and Korea in particular, really investing in cultural and creative industries in particular. So it's an increasingly very globally competitive area. We have a key asset in our music industry, and we want to make sure that that is protected further.
Great, thank you very much, panellists. So David, I'm going to pick up on the question you asked, because I think it's on everyone's mind, this very challenging geopolitical context that we're in now. You could argue, and a lot of people have put this to me, it's all about hard power. Where does soft power sit in this world of, force, might is good? Could you sort of elaborate a little bit, each of you, on that? So let me actually start with you, Linda, then I'll do a slightly reverse order.
So the taxonomy of soft power, as envisioned by Joseph Nye, then elaborated on in my new field, clearly, this is beyond economics, is that foreign policy is a combination of hard and soft power. And so if you do hard power, for instance, without thinking through the consequences of nation building, as an example, that's about soft power. And you can also use soft power, which is increasingly the paradigm around the world today, as a way of specifically supporting economic growth. So what we have seen is the deployment of economic tools to achieve non-economic ends. So you've seen that, for instance, I'll just use Japan and Korea as an example, because when I was in Brussels moderating a session, I had to deploy all of my diplomatic skills, not gained at the highest levels like you, but gained through a governing body at an Oxford college, where even the principal is barely the first among equals, to try and just make sure the Japanese and the Korean ambassadors were happy because they had been in a trade war over things which are much broader than trade. And this has been going on for some time. So what we see now is, in order to, I would think, strategically use your country's assets, both hard and soft, to be very specific, because you can't do everything. about achieving what is hugely important in a world not just riven by geopolitics, but slowly economic growth, is to prioritize and say, we know we live in a world of geoeconomics, which is geopolitics affecting economic policy. So prosperity and improving people's lives are at the core of what a lot of countries are aiming for. So how can you deploy these assets in a way that most benefits people? And that, to me, is one of the ways you can manage this challenging world, which is be specific, be concrete, work out the inputs that have the biggest bang, and most importantly, help the most people. And to me, that's why foreign policy is absolutely essential, being tied to domestic economic policy. So the two are always one, and the policy strategies, the assets, achieve something that I think will make us look back in a few years and say, we exercise our influence in the most positive way for the most people.
Great, thank you, Linda and Tom. Hard power, where does music fit?
I think music is the ultimate, from my perspective, the ultimate form of communication. It transcends, you get rid of borders and boundaries, and it's a great leveler, I think, of people across the world. It's something we can all relate to very much, and we all have our own personal connection to music. And I think we've seen that in the past as well, in terms of like some of the most geopolitically challenging situations that the world's faced. Things like the Cold War, and particularly there, I mean, actually the influence of music and culture, I think, was actually a really means to actually overcoming some of the differences between East and West. And I think you kind of saw that, and then the kind of things that followed. So I think music can really play an important role in that. And obviously there is the hard power and the synchronicity. I mean, the one thing that struck me from the first meeting of the Soft Power Council is I don't think I've ever been in, I've been working in music for 12 years. I haven't been in a meeting with necessarily with military heads and overseas development organisations before, and it was really probably about time that we had that, because I think there's some really key moments that we're now facing, and a very complex geopolitical situation. So I think having this more broad-minded approach to how we can actually realise things within the cultural sphere, and how that can support other goals that the government and the nation has, is incredibly welcome.
Brilliant, thank you. And over to you, Sarah.
I mean, nobody will discount the importance of hard power, but to be honest, especially for a country, an economy the size of Britain, you need soft power to leverage the hard power. You can't do without it. And especially today, people are looking for leadership. You know, in this context, they are looking for thought leadership, value leadership, and that's what the UK can provide. And to be honest, I've seen it before. You know, the UK has never had the resources that the US could put on the table, say on development, on humanitarian issues. But in the heyday of DFID, it was recognized as a clear thought leader that was driving the agenda because he had brought together the best of what he can offer. We have some of the best universities in this country. We have some of the best think tanks. We have, of course, the creative industries, the BBC World Service. We have a lot of assets that we can leverage to provide a thought leadership. The UK that did very interesting, experimental things in the run-up to the Paris Agreement. Not many people know that there is a lot of UK soft power behind that, because for a number of years the UK placed climate diplomats in key countries that were forging relationships and preparing, paving the ground towards Paris. That didn't cost a lot of money, it was not hard power, but he built on those two key words in the Foreign Secretary's speech, trust and collaboration, and that is the words that he repeats all the time, and I firmly believe in. And I would add a third one, which is credibility. Our soft power will come by being credible around our values, around our positions, standing for values that other people would like to see upheld at the moment. And so actually I think this moment provides a huge opportunities for the UK to reassert that leadership. We're seeing that in this space. Last night at ODI, I moderated a very high-level discussion behind closed doors, and it was sad that it had to be behind closed doors on Beijing plus 30, 30 years from Beijing. Where are we today on the platform for action for women? The UK has a massive opportunity to reassert the leadership on values that protect, diversity, equality and inclusion, the reassert, women's rights. Those are the kind of things that others are looking, to us to do, leveraging all the assets that we have, bringing them together so that we can have a stronger voice. When I was in Davos in January, it was very interesting, and we exchanged around that. The country that was talking about soft power and leading the conversations on soft power in Davos was Thailand. Now, it was not about hard power or a lot of money, but it was about how they leveraged a lot of, creative assets from music to tourism to cuisine, all sorts of different things. But they had a really concerted, strategic effort at bringing that all together, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Thailand. When I was doing some prep for the launch of the council, we were looking at the data, and Korea is such an interesting example. Through 30-year investment, and you all have heard of the Korean wave concept with the Squid Game, Korean music, and even makeup apparently is the key thing. And the result of that is they've had a 300% increase in people wanting to learn Korean, which in itself obviously helps then people be attracted to Korea, invest in Korea. So smart policy. So sort of building on that, I wanted to think a little bit about our competitors, and we're going to hear more about this tomorrow when the brand is launched. And there are our friendly competitors, question mark, are some of them still our friends? And then there's the hard adversaries, and China, obviously a very smart user of the combined hard and soft power with its Belt and Road Initiative, backed up with Confucius Centres. Just wanted you all to tease out a little bit, how do we position ourselves vis-a-vis the adversaries, vis-a-vis the competitors, and perhaps we should be trying to work more, adversaries versus our allies. In this hard-nosed world, should we be even trying to compete with friends and try rather than collaborate? Any sort of thoughts on that? So maybe start with you on this one.
Well, I think, from a music perspective, what we have seen in recent years is an increasingly very dominance with American music, in particular North American music, in the charts, and that's actually created some anxieties from people within the UK sector that we're maybe seeing a shift towards there. And as mentioned earlier, Korea in particular and K-pop has become really, really successful. Youth are getting very much behind it. So I definitely, the music industry, it's a number of challenges. A lot of our adversaries aren't necessarily in a kind of almost territorial respect. Obviously, there's some other issues, and we're talking a little bit before the panel about AI and artificial intelligence and how we kind of navigate some of those issues too. So they're obviously challenged on a kind of market base or brand base or nation base. But I think there's some also kind of issues which we really need to kind of get to grips with as well, which we can't kind of lose sight of. Yeah,
so working together where we've got a common interest to solve a particular issue, like people will be aware, there's a live debate going on around AI and, how you protect content of the future, very important one. Sarah, any thoughts on that, friends versus foes?
Yeah, again, the key to me is to identify where there is a common interest that Peter was talking about and work towards that, but changing the way in which we do it. Over the years, we've tended to be a bit paternalistic. Of course, our history is also rooted in the history of colonialism. All of those things need to change. We need to have a different approach at identifying, particularly, you talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, so what China has done in a number of countries in Africa, obviously in Asia around the BRI, how we engage with our partners, especially in low and middle income countries, in a way that really puts a shared interest at the heart. Soft power comes from identifying, what are the touch points that we can leverage together. It's not about, dictating the outcome that you want. It's about influencing towards achieving a shared goal. And so that shared goal really needs to be shared. It can't come from what just we want. We're not going to achieve anything if we just put the interest of the UK on the table without understanding the interests of our partners, who can otherwise become foes.
Yeah, indeed. Linda.
I sort of think of this world at the moment as shifting, multi-aligned world. So we've talked about a multipolar world in terms of growth, but I think the world is probably multi-aligned. A country can have multiple alignments at one point. It kind of reminds me, how many of you have seen the sitcom Friends from the 90s? Oh, thank goodness. I talk to people often who are born in the 21st century. It's really quite depressing. So they have a term in one episode called frenemies. So, as an economist, there's probably three buckets that we might want to view other countries. So one is competitors, one is areas that we need to cooperate, and a third area, and this is actually from, I think it's a nice way of getting 3 C's, which is challenge. So there's going to be areas where we will vehemently disagree on values. And in foreign policy, I completely agree. Being values and principles driven is a massive source of attraction. And at the heart of soft power is attraction, it's influence. So Joseph Nye's term is hard power is push, soft power is pull. So for me, then you think about the easier areas are actually collaboration. We must collaborate with countries we may not fully agree with to provide global public goods, whether that's development, health, or environment. The areas in which we compete, that's interesting because economists love healthy competition. And where we, I think, can use soft power is we live in a world which is, as I say, multi-aligned and fragmented. So for instance, if you want to grow, the biggest part of the British economy is services. Services globally doesn't have a set of trade rules that's comparable to the trade rules around goods. Those are also being challenged right now. But if you wanted to make headway in terms of opening up global markets for services, having what global trade should be about, a level playing field, a multilateral system. Everybody knows the rules of the game. That is how you make trade fair and freer. You can't achieve it right now because the World Trade Organization has to decide on the basis of unanimity. That opens up space for countries like the UK to become an honest broker, to lead a plurilateral group of countries, to begin to formulate rules which can help open markets by bringing in our fantastic expertise in the country, soft power assets, expert input, so that we start to create a set of norms and standards in an area that other countries can join and eventually become a way of opening up global markets. So this is exactly what happened with the Trade and Services Agreement. The UK was part of a small group of countries working via the WTO, not all countries, but just a group of interested countries, to formulate rules that were propagated a short while ago on how you begin to put rules around services trade. And now they're working on digital trade. And I think that kind of soft power helps the UK. When you're at the table, you're helping to set the rules, but in a way that's inclusive, and that can help our growth. And by the way, at the end of the day, the US and China both signed up to TISA, even though they weren't originally part of it, because they understand the adage I've heard in Brussels, which is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
No, it's really interesting, isn't it? 'Cause it's a combination of the UK's, I think, strong convening power, its ability to set standards. We're global leaders on setting standards and bringing a coalition together. So really interesting. I wanted to bring it into the Soft Power Council itself, and thank you all for agreeing to join. As Tom said, it is this interesting sort of blend of expertise. So if taking... each of you take any of the 6 priorities that the Foreign Secretary has tasked us to work on. You know, growth, as I said, is clearly one, but pick any of them. Could you tell us a little bit about your thoughts about what the Soft Power Council can do in quite a concrete way to help us achieve goal X? Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, so as I was saying before, I think the most important, in a way, addition that the Soft Power Council can bring is to try and help achieve some strategic coherence across the different areas where the UK is soft power. You know, I also chair British fencing. I'm very involved in the sport as well, and I see how we have influence in so many disparate domains, but there is no effort to really bring that together. So I'll be co-chairing the working group on Africa for the Soft Power Council, and I can see how we can leverage the music industry. I mean, Afrobeats is a massive, kind of growing area, or, obviously the value of the BBC World Service, the appeal that our universities have, over the years I've met so many ministers ministers in my work in Africa who had graduated in UK universities and remember, fondly their time in the UK. But more importantly, things that are really critical for development in Africa, technology at the heart of it. Our partners want technology that is not obsolete, that is not what we don't need anymore, but they want to have access to the best, latest technology and cooperate around that. And we have, fantastic assets in the UK that we can deploy both in terms of, research and development and actually, tech companies that are interested in investing and working in this space. So what the Soft Power Council can do is bring all of this together around a more coherent strategy that has, clear timelines and leverages key moments on the calendar as well.
Brilliant. Tom, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, growth very much. I think we've kind of touched on a little bit. I mean, from our perspective, music forms part of the creative industries. We've been identified as one of the 8 sectors for growth. I mean, from our perspective, we've seen this over a number of years. The creative industries is still quite a relatively new concept, I think, in terms of it kind of dates back to sort of like the late 1990s. I think the kind of definition of it came about then. So I think we've been on quite a journey, I think, over the last 20, 30 years in terms of actually the credibilities of sectors like music and film. And I think it's actually, we've always talked about these being great assets for the UK, but now actually having that recognition and actually making sure that it's not just kind of fluffy, nice to have, but there's some real impact that we can have both on a kind of economic level, but also on a kind of more meaningful diplomatic level. I think that's a really positive moment.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. And over to you, Linda.
I think the Soft Power Council is it's unique, the joint venture between 2 departments, and I think it is. Has huge potential because what you've done is you've taken our soft power assets, people like Tom, well, not you specific, oh, maybe you specific, I just mean like UK music, but, expertise like people like Sarah, and it gives, it provides the soft power assets, which are the tools for economic diplomacy to advance the UK's interests in a way that I feel is inclusive because it's about, remember, it's about whole. It's about trying to make advances that would help not just our growth, but other countries' growth. And to me, that's why this is really rather special. And I suppose the other way to, I'm going to co-chair the US working group, and we do face a lot of challenges at the moment. And I think economic diplomacy, backed up with what can we offer in terms of soft power assets to facilitate relationships, is going to be at the heart of making what we do effective. And I think that is, again, something which it requires the government to have this vision and strategy, because most countries that have begun to promote soft power are doing exactly this, trying to deploy assets to try and achieve a particular end. But you have to do it so carefully because, as I said at our council meeting, the paradox of soft power is that if people think you're deploying it, it undermines its effectiveness. Nobody likes to feel they're being influenced. I bought this necklace purely because I loved it. It was not marketing at all. And so maybe an example of how I've seen the British government already begin to do this. So the government needs to convene, but it needs to do so in a collaborative partnership way. I'm now stealing your term. This is how you presented it at the council, which is, I mentioned, I'm the chair of the Royal Commonwealth Society, and we launched a Commonwealth Clean Oceans Plastics campaign in conjunction with the Commonwealth Games Federation. So you'll see soon the King's Baton Relay will feature a sustainability campaign. This was launched at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa in October with the Foreign Secretary who gave a inspiring, supportive speech on the back of, I think, a very busy schedule. He didn't need to come and do this to meet with young leaders, young athletes, sustainability advocates. And our patron is the King, so we had a good connection there with another major soft power asset. But by doing this in a supportive way, I think it sends a signal that sustainability is a shared goal of humanity. We support young people, grassroots, charities doing this. And this campaign is now going to travel to 56 Commonwealth countries and all of the territories as well. And so that picture, that image, that message, that value gets conveyed without having to do anything particular. And so to me, that's an example of why government needs to play a role, but to do it in a way that's, well, diplomatic.
No, brilliant. Well, thank you. I mean, I think just sticking with the growth theme, because I think it is such an important one. So I think creative industries themselves, as Tom said, it's one of our, 8 priority sectors under the creative industry. We've heard in the London presentation of how important it is to the London economy. But there, we've been exploring in the council what other assets do we have which support and facilitate growth. So rule of law, for example, the UK is recognised globally as respected on, respecting rule of law and our contracts and so on. There's also the English language. And of course, our amazing universities, both the teaching and the research function. So I just wanted thoughts on any of those points in terms of how we, as you said, Sarah, the sum greater than the parts to try and bring it all together. But do you want to start on that, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, again, thinking about, I've already mentioned the BBC World Service. Wherever I have worked, I have seen in the most remote parts of the world, there was a little radio listening to the BBC World Service. And the cuts that the BBC World Service has experienced, I have to say, have not really helped our soft power. So I hope that we will see and understand how valuable that is, because there is nothing like that. The BBC World Service is unique. Leveraging the popularity of our Premier League. I'm Italian born, I would contend that football is stronger, but wherever you go, again, you'll see results of the matches of the Premier League sort of put on boards in the middle of nowhere. I mean, these are things that you cannot create. I mean, they're there, we need to leverage them, because we could actually lose them if we don't leverage, all the assets that we have. But we need to be intentional. And particularly, you talk about the English language. I made this point at the first meeting of the Soft Power Council. A lot of people have been coming here over the years, I am one of them, to learn English, when they were young people. A lot of Europeans, in particular, through, the Erasmus program, or just, coming in the summer to study English. I have seen more and more of these young people go to Ireland or to Malta to learn English, because we made it really difficult for them to come to the UK, to have that experience. Those 3-4 weeks in the summer are also a form of soft power. They create the connection to the UK. They create the ability to identify with London in general or other parts of the UK. They create that connection. We've taken that away. It's very dangerous. It's meant fewer people coming to our universities. That's a loss, in economic terms as well. So we need to be strategic as how we leverage the English language and, the offer around that, because that is the most supreme form of soft power we have in many ways. But to do that, we need to be able to be more courageous around the rules that allow these people to come to the country. We've made it very difficult, even for Europeans to come here. They need a passport. Not many people will want to buy a passport or invest in a passport for a 12-year-old. So if they can go to Ireland to study with an ID card for Europe, they'll do that. And also we project an image of a closed country, of a country that is afraid, to allow people to come and experience the beauty of the UK. So these are things that actually don't need money, don't need resources. It's just having, the courage and the confidence to demonstrate that we are an open country, and, we want people to come and experience what the UK has got to offer.
Brilliant. Thank you, Linda.
So I think all of the different areas that the Soft Power Council are going to focus on. So I mentioned I'm working on the growth area, but the example I gave was sustainability. And I think this is a broader point about how you deploy soft power, which is, so I'll use a personal example. So how many of you are on a social media website? I don't know if I can mention specific ones that network you to other people about jobs. Okay, right. So the way that social networks and social capital works is you do something for the community, or you provide some information for your network, and you build a connection, like sustainability in the case of nations, that forms a favorable opinion of you from others in your network. And so therefore, when something comes up, they might think, oh, actually, this person seems to have great skills or critical analysis or expertise, or they just like you. In which case, you start to get returns, not from specifically what you've offered, but something adjacent or something tangential. And that's actually how I think of the 8 goals of the Soft Power Council, which is they all support each other because it builds a picture of the UK. And one of the things that I think is important for us to perhaps think a bit about how we can help all of you in the room, which is you can because this world is so fragmented, you can like a country but not like its government. And so how do you therefore ensure that the attraction you feel to the UK is attraction that's consistent, that's recognized, that's linked to a government that is promoting these shared values. So in other words, I think countries without a soft power strategy have great assets, and maybe the tourism sector does really well. It doesn't necessarily mean the country's effective in terms of deploying economic diplomacy. They can be two separate things. So to have a coordinating mechanism like this, I think is actually what's hugely different. And hopefully, it will be successful because, I'm going to use a quote from Henry Ford, if we're all pulling in the same direction, success is assured.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I'd really like to explore with the Soft Power Council is the kind of interconnectedness of us all as well, because I think there are a lot of linkages and overlaps with our sector, music and other creative industries, with a lot of the other kind of themes. And if I think in particular, we're thinking about rule of law and talked a little bit earlier about IP and copyright and how important that is. I mean, the UK has a very strong framework there. It can have maybe some improvements, but in terms of actually appreciating what we kind of have in place compared to other countries, I think and how we can maybe enhance that, I think is a key moment. Another area I think is around education institutions as well, and it's really good to have them in the room, but of course there's lots of conservatoires in the UK, lots of music colleges and schools, globally leading places. So I really hope that we'll get a better understanding about how we can kind of work more closely together and actually realise about the kind of shared assets that we maybe have, and actually we can actually be advocating collectively on each other's behalf in this kind of forum, which will have some kind of tangible benefits.
Yeah, some greater than the parts, I think, is coming through very clearly. So we're going to be wrapping up soon, so I want to give you all a chance to add any final points which might be around what does success look like, if we really succeed in this venture, what would we have changed? Well, any other final thoughts you want to add, Sarah, from you?
I'm just thinking, again, we've talked at the beginning about how this is a particularly challenging geopolitical moment. I think we have a few opportunities already in the course of this year to position the UK as a country that is, back there to lead, to try and shape global norms. There is a real challenge at the moment in terms of upholding the norms. And, there'll be a number of appointments in the international calendar where the UK can do that, starting, of course, the spring meetings at the World Bank and the IMF this year will be very interesting, especially if, the US progressively withdraws, from the Bretton Woods institutions. We have a British colleague, Lord Mal Brown, who is leading the rethinking of the Bretton Woods institutions at 80 years later. So again, it's an opportunity, for the UK to shape some of that thinking that is the forefront of the financing for development in Seville, in Spain, where again, we'll be thinking about what kind of paradigm, we put on the table. the reshaping of the peace building architecture. This is, something else that is going on, and will go to the UN General Assembly. And more importantly of all, for me, is the G20 summit. This year the presidency is with South Africa. This is an opportunity for the UK to partner with South Africa to support what South Africa is doing in terms of leading a G20 that is putting an inclusive growth agenda on the table, that is thinking about trade in a different way, that is also taking a position on global norms in a very assertive way. And so for the UK to partner with South Africa, it's an opportunity to project a new kind of leadership, one that is really and truly around rebuilding trust and collaboration, as the Foreign Secretary says.
Excellent. Such as some very high tasks, but very important ones. Linda.
So my KPIs would be stronger, sustainable per capita GDP growth. So growth of average incomes, when you decompose it, the component that comes from international trade, investment, and I would also say, because the drivers are international, my second KPI would be that the countries that we've worked with have also experienced similar improvements in growth. This is actually what trade theory tells us, is exactly what happens when countries trade. We just have to make sure we help the losers from trade. And then finally, given that we are at brand finance and it's about branding, I would love for the Soft Power Council and for this initiative to come up with, spontaneously, of course, and given what I said about marketing, a term that captures the optimism, confidence, and the importance of being an honest broker in this fractured world. So not quite cool Britannia, but something that captures, I think, the ethos of what I can clearly see the UK is poised to do, has already been doing, and will do more of. So what is it they say, answers on a postcard?
Absolutely. Please. Colleagues, let's do a collective one on this. Thank you. Linda, great challenge. Over to you, Tom.
So I think my kind of, I very much agree with the kind of key sort of metrics on a kind of GDP basis that we've kind of talked about. But I think that we talked about 3 C's earlier. My 2 C's would be confidence and creativity. Certainly confidence, I very much want to build on that point you made about Cool Britannia, not necessarily going back into the past, but I do think that there was a moment in time which we've kind of maybe slightly lost here in terms of speaking about the UK on a very confident level. And I think this is a really huge opportunity just to actually maximising the assets that we have and being a very forward-looking nation and are confident in our place on the earth and how we actually project ourselves. So I think that's the main thing, confidence, and the other thing is around creativity and actually making sure that we can continue to develop new artists and new music and because I don't think we can kind of entirely rely on our past successes. It's great we have such a rich history in that regard, but we cannot be complacent at all on that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Just to add a few sort of final thoughts to my reflections. It's been a great panel, by the way, and it's really helping me as the civil servant, helping to drive this forward. And I should say emphasise it's a joint venture with DCMS. So I think we've got 5 C's now, and I think they're all important. So Linda's framework of compete, cooperate, and challenge. And I think building on the confidence point, having the confidence to step into, as you said, Sarah, the leadership gap. This is a very complex world, and the UK is probably one of the few countries that has a pretty good stock of hard power, but an extremely strong stock of soft power. And as you said, or somebody said, the trick is amplifying your hard power with your soft power. So let's step confidently into that space, make the sum greater than the parts by bringing the collective assets and wisdom and knowledge together, and get the real hard benefits in terms of higher GDP growth, a more secure world, more open world, and so on. So there's a big prize out there. And I think, I'm going to end again on let's have the confidence to step into it. So thank you very much, panelists. This has been great.